So now, without further delay, let's begin today's event, sponsored by Neustar and hosted by American Banker. It's my pleasure to introduce your moderator for today, and that is Michael Sisk. Mike, you have the floor.
Thanks very much, Greg. I'd like to welcome the audience once again. We're grateful that you've chosen to share some of your day with us. We know your time is quite valuable, and we will honor that today with what I'm confident will be an engaging 60 minutes or so of discussion. Once again, our topic today is fighting fraud with identity intelligence. And my name is Michael Sisk. I'll be your moderator today. I've been a New York-based journalist for about 15 years. I've had stints as investor editor at Red Herring and editor-at-large at American Banker, and I've written for Barron's, Crane's New York Business, Inc., Institutional Investor, Strategy in Business, and Worth, and I've co-written and edited a couple of books. The most recent was Merge Ahead, Mastering the 5 Enduring Trends of Artful M&A. However, more important than my background are those of the 3 excellent speakers that we have with us today. I'd like to introduce them all to you now. The first is Rupert Young, General Manager of Identification and Verification Product Manager at Neustar. Rupert joined Neustar in November 2010 and has over 15 years of experience in the Internet industry. He is responsible for product management for Neustar's lead intelligence, customer interaction management, and compliance solutions. He joined Neustar from a startup working on online advertising where he headed product management. Previously, he worked at AT&T and SBC in corporate strategy, product management, business development, architecture planning, and R&D. He graduated from MIT with an SMSB in computer science. We're very happy to have Rupert with us today. And joining Rupert is Adam Russell. Adam is currently Executive Director of Financial Services at Neustar, where he is applying his 18 years of financial service experience to drive industry and product development growth. Prior to joining Neustar, Adam was Senior Vice President of Consumer and Small Business Credit Cards, where he led the originations, marketing operations, and product development functions. He was previously the Vice President of Strategic Accounts at Experian Information Solutions, where he was responsible for managing and growing the strategic relationship between Experian and Capital One. Prior to this, Adam worked at Capital One for 13 years in a variety of marketing, analytics, and operations roles, from its spinoff from Signet Bank to its current position as a Fortune 200 company and top 5 credit card issuer. Adam graduated from the University of Richmond with a BS in Business Administration with concentrations in marketing and Spanish, and completed a master's certificate in Lean Six Sigma from Villanova University. So also very, very happy to have Adam with us today. And rounding out the panel is Andras Cser. Andras serves security and risk professionals is a principal analyst serving security and risk professionals at Forrester. He is a leading expert on identity management, access management, user account provisioning, entitlement management, federation, privileged identity management, and role design and management. Andras covers cloud security and enterprise fraud management, which have many synergies with identity and access management when an organization needs to protect against risk and wants to manage fraud appropriately. He helps clients develop enterprise strategies for creating business value through identity management, cloud security, and fraud management. His research focuses on strategy, cost-benefit analysis, architecture, performance, and scalability of identity and access management and provisioning solutions, enterprise fraud management solutions, and role-based access control, as well as maintenance and distributed intranet and internet identity systems. He maintains an interest in evaluating the skill sets and core competencies of professional service providers in these spaces. And we are extremely happy to have Andras with us as well. Now, just before we jump into the real meat of the program today, I wanted to reiterate just 2 things that Greg said at the top of the hour. We do have time at the end for Q&A. We set aside usually about 10 minutes or so. We encourage you to put your questions into the queue as they occur to you throughout the discussion. We don't need to wait until the very end. So please, as the Spirit moves you, go ahead and log in your question. If for some reason we do run out of time, which once in a while happens, we don't get to everyone's questions, we will follow up afterward. So please, your voice will be heard. Ask anything you'd like. And also, we have, I think, 2 polls today, and I assure you they're quick and painless, and we do share the results with everyone here today, and it's kind of a nice level setting for everyone to sort of see where everyone else sort of stands on these issues that we've come together to discuss today. So I encourage 100% participation if at all possible. So please, when those polls come up, if you can participate, that would be excellent. And let me think here. I think that sort of brings me to the end of my little spiel here. I'll be back for doing polls and Q&A at the end, but for now, I would like to turn things over to Andras. Andras, you have the floor.
Thank you. So at Forrester, I look at all these beautiful areas, right? But today, what I'm here to speak about is really what are some of the major trends and areas of interest for our customers in preventing web fraud. And before we even go any further, I'd like to talk about some of the motivations, some of the drivers why people implement the web fraud management solutions. So obviously, we see folks talk and being concerned primarily about web fraud management efficiency. This is the number of account takeovers. This is the number of issues, number of fraudulent logins that actually cause financial loss to an organization, financial loss to a bank, or any kind of a company. And this is obviously the primary responsibility for all folks and organizations in fraud management, as well as in IT security to solve, right? So keeping your fraud levels where they are, or even being able to decrease those to bring them lower is your primary responsibility. While you are doing that, and while you're making sure your fraud losses are minimal, it is also important to understand your operational efficiency. So if keeping your fraud levels low means that you have to hire 50 more analysts, 50 more investigators, folks who are actually looking at suspicious transactions, looking at things that the system or systems for fraud risk scoring have outsorted and identified as potentially fraudulent, you're going to be spending a lot of money. So at the same time, while you're trying to maintain fraud levels, you also have to maintain operational efficiencies. So this is basically making sure that you're able to do more with less or the same level of resources that you've been able to do before. And in the bottom, this is obviously a very important aspect of making sure that you have fraud management in check. It's basically making sure that you have customer satisfaction and reduce customer friction. In essence, what this means is that no matter how good your security is, if it's so good that you actually secure yourself out of business, customers will go someplace else, and you won't have anything to solve fraud management for. So basically, recently we've had a lot of discussions with marketing and line of business people that are saying that, look, we understand that you have to manage fraud, you have to manage security, you have to understand operational efficiency, but we are here to make sure that our organization provides a decent customer experience to our customers. And in the age of the customer, which really means that the power has shifted to your customers and they have a large impact on social media and various other outlets as to how your company is going to grow and be able to do business, you have to actually make sure that the customers is happy. Another element or other impact of good fraud management online and web fraud is that you have to understand and basically picture web fraud management in not in a vacuum, but more in a multi-channel, omni-channel, cross-channel scenario, right? So if you look at these columns, right, you're looking at the web and mobile channel, but it is clearly one of the channels where you may be looking at fraud. On mobile devices, mobile applications, right, you also are going to have some fraudulent activity. Then you have the voice channels, that's the telephone column, and that really also means that you have to be able to make sure that you don't have any fraudulent calls, you don't have to have any folks who sound very nice but are signing up fraudulently for services or are impersonating victims, right? And finally, we have in-person transactions, point of sale or branch-based operations where people can also commit fraud. So that's one aspect of the web fraud management. Then the other aspect is basically the tasks. So in addition to authentication, i.e. logging people in, folks routinely forget that the whole identity lifecycle and web fraud management begins not with just authentication, but also with identity proofing, understanding who this user is that's approaching, what they're trying to do. Are they in fact the same person that we've already had a business relationship potentially in the past with, or is this a fraudulent sign-up? So identity proofing and making sure that this person is the right person, it is not a synthetic individual, not somebody who's trying to commit identity fraud and theft, is very important. Device fingerprinting also plays a huge role. Understanding whether we've seen this device, this computer, this mobile device, tablet, smartphone, telephone, or in some cases this person, right, in a setting for sign up. Authentication, again, it's an important task as well. So logging people in, sending them one-time passwords, getting a password from them, setting up a social security number, date of birth, zip code, or PIN numbers on the voice channel, or using identity cards to vet and prove these folks. If you have a sensitive or high-risk transaction, you also have to look at how you need to step up authenticate the users, basically ask them to provide two-factor authentication, which can be something like biometrics or one-time password or really contextual authentication, GPS geolocation, geofencing, etc. Mobile devices. You have the problem that mobile devices are not out of band. If you only have a mobile app, you're getting all the one-time passwords, all the login and authentication on one device. And obviously on a phone, you have really limited choices. So again, this is also very important to be able to ask the right knowledge-based authentication questions on the phone if you're looking at a high-risk, high-level transaction. In person, really, there's nothing else. Once you show a teller your ID in a bank branch, you're going to be allowed to do whatever you can. And finally, transaction monitoring, the back end part of the transaction. You really look at what are the specific transactions that users perform. How much money they transfer, who they transfer it to, how does that transfer or purchase event fit into a longer stream of events. So this is again just to kind of look at the landscape, understand that the placement of this problem and the context of this problem, and if we look at some of the architectural requirements, some of how our customers have built out defense mechanisms, it's pretty clear to see here and easy to see in this diagram that it's actually not a single layer type of architecture, but you got multiple layers, right? So the enrollment happens through the identity proofing and vetting layer, where you do a knowledge-based authentication. You look at device attributes, you look at IP addresses of known bad and good devices, and try to kind of ascertain and filter out as much information about that web activity as you possibly can. Further, you also want to look at and understand and make sure there's no malware on the endpoint. So if the PC or the mobile endpoint has some level of a malware on it that can hijack or capture information as the user types it and maybe exfiltrate it into a botnet, that is definitely not a good thing. So we really have to protect against that as well. Once you move from the enrollment to the login or authentication event. Adaptive and risk-based authentication is again a very integral part of building a solid set of layers for fraud management. So this really means looking at session speed, understanding how the user clicks on the portal, looking at navigational patterns, looking at device fingerprint and device IDs to take into account things like screen resolution, the browser version, the browser locale, the operating system version, and various other attributes and parameters you can actually capture about the endpoint, building a unique device identifier or device fingerprint out of it, and understanding whether you've seen that device in potentially a good transaction or a bad transaction. And you can obviously see that, hey, if somebody's been trying to open the 20th fraudulent account or apply fraudulently for the 20th credit card from the same device, then it's probably a fraudulent transaction. Similarly, for routine user login, if you are seeing a user login from the same place they always log in from, say from during normal business hours from the United States, from their home computer or from their work computer, that is probably a lower level risk transaction than if you see a new device, maybe an iPad or tablet logging in for the very first time from a coffee shop in China during the middle of the night. So that's pretty. These are pretty good ways to set a risk score and then basically prompt the user, depending on risk score, for higher level of assurance and really authenticators and get more assurance of the user's identity. And on the back end, as I mentioned, you have enterprise fraud management, which is transaction monitoring, as well as anti-money laundering. Some adjacent technologies that we've seen folks looking at and being very important: link analysis, being able to tie transactions, good and bad, together to see what kind of common attributes they share, such as a phone number of a person or a device, or maybe an amount number, maybe an address of the player, maybe the name. So looking at how the transactions hang together. Behavioral profiling is being able to identify certain behaviors of known good and known bad users, understand any behavioral changes. So if a user has not been doing certain transactions or actions so far and has started doing things completely out of order, maybe there's a fraud or risk pattern behind that. Identity resolution is all about understanding the various spellings of a name, various names. For example, Middle Eastern names like Muhammad can be spelled in various different ways. So, and on the left-hand side, we have cyber threat intelligence, which is really all about understanding the broader cyber threat landscape and making sure that we're not falling victim to a broader exfiltration attack or advanced persistent threat and other data breach types of activities. So if you look at basically fraud management and web fraud management, it's really not just a back-end transaction monitoring problem. You have a lot of false alerts, a lot of signals that turn out to be noise, right? And they really are not indicators of true fraudulent activity. When you're doing that and responding to these kinds of false alerts, the operational resource impact can be huge. And obviously, you can have a huge impact on the customer experience as well, which is not necessarily a good thing. So again, the web fraud management anatomy. On the left-hand side, there's the contextual variables, clickstream analytics, the user identity, their IP address, their device fingerprint, session speed, what time of day they're logging in. Then you can create a risk score out of it, and then you can basically use various biometrics, security questions and answers, hardware tokens, smart cards, email tokens, text messages sent to the mobile phone, and software tokens as well. So this is really adjusting the risk of the transaction to the authenticator type that you're going to be using after that. So some of the factors in fraud prevention include things like IP geolocation. Some of the pros of IP geolocation that we've seen here are that it's easy to actually get the data. There's a number of providers in this space. It's relatively easy to find out at some level of detail which state or city a certain IP address is, but it's very hard to actually get high quality data. You really have to make sure that you treat whatever the IP geolocation service returns with a grain of salt and use multiple sources of information to triangulate that location so that you're not placing somebody in the middle of a pond, right, in a forest, basically, when you look at an IP address, which has happened to me, by the way. Device fingerprinting, again, is creating a unique identifier based off of installed fonts on the device, screen resolution, time shift, browser version, browser type, language, and so on. The device fingerprinting is actually a very good thing. It can be used for building a reputation. The bad thing or the con cons of using device fingerprinting is that it would require for it to use code on the web page, typically JavaScript or ActiveX, or use an SDK by the device fingerprinting vendor that needs to be built into the mobile application. So that can require some refactoring and recoding of mobile applications as well. So but again, device fingerprinting has generally been demonstrated to be useful for web fraud management. Some additional factors that we see here are identity verification and knowledge-based authentication, which are the pros there for ID verification and knowledge-based authentication, KBA, that it is fairly hard to spoof, meaning it's hard to find out, what your monthly payment is for your vehicle or houses or mortgages. It's hard to find out what color of a car you leased from 2000 to 2002, and really some of the problems around identity verification and knowledge-based authentication can be that some of these questions can be hard to answer even for the legitimate users, right? So a lot of us don't remember who we, what we paid for certain installments or loans, etc. And really, if you want to keep the answerability of questions high, you are actually going to be only able to ask a handful of maybe 3 or 4 or 5 questions about the user that are easy to answer, which leads to fatigue of users. So people are increasingly tired of answering these same questions and then basically having some doubts whether these questions actually are super safe and can serve as a really good way to vet their identity. And finally, identity attribute insights. This is basically looking at a user's identity from social graphs, social media, and public data sources. Fairly easy to gather, fairly easy to get to, but some of these attributes are self-asserted. So basically, if you want to vet me on Facebook as to what my favorite color is that I specified on Facebook, or out of these 5 people who my friends are, this information has actually been asserted by me myself on Facebook. It's not something that a third-party agency like a credit reporting bureau has captured about me. So that can be fairly difficult. If you look at some of the trends, right, in web fraud management, it's fairly easy to see that you have to work with the chief marketing officer that may issue the edict that you have to minimize the authentication friction, and you have the CISO on the other side of the fence basically trying to ensure security and a lot of times these days ensure that they have a job, right? We've seen a lot of heads roll after data breaches of CISOs and even CIOs or even CEOs. So again, big conflict between user experience and security. Device fingerprinting is becoming a standard out there for good web fraud management. The inclusion of the phone IVR or CSR channels, understanding repetitive patterns on these channels is definitely becoming a trend. Being able to kind of use the call center as a precursor of web fraud or as an aftermath of web fraud, as well as for understanding whether, hey, we have a call coming in from the same phone number, from the same voice, asking about 20 different accounts. Why is that happening, and is that definitely a legitimate transaction? Again, mobile software development kits for iOS and Android, as well as maybe Windows phone type of applications to blend in. Being able to gather as much information about the mobile context as possible, including GPS geolocation, sensor data, which is also becoming a hot topic, to be able to understand how a user holds their phone, how they move it, how they interact with the phone, how firmly or lightly they're pressing on the screen, and we expect that the new touchscreen that Apple came out with, the iPhone 6 Plus area, will help with that likeness of touch evaluation. So sensor data is definitely playing an increasing role here. Server-side attributes being preferred to client-side falsification. So anytime you have a mobile device or a laptop or desktop interact with the backend, the server, you have actually no way to ensure that the endpoint is not infected. So or the parameters that the endpoint sends you are not truly manipulated. So the way to defend against this is basically combine client-side provided attributes with server-side attributes. So looking at timing variables on the server side, looking at attributes on the server side that cannot be falsified. And again, web fraud management is gaining a lot of ground in the payment value chain. Understanding the movement of a user, how they have clicked around, for example, has played a big role in 3D Secure payment gateway implementation. So reducing, again, the user's need to authenticate explicitly if you have a run-of-the-mill, low-risk transaction, but basically putting up more obstacles and two-factor authentication even if you feel that this is a risky transaction, even before you allow the payment authorization to happen. So again, huge way of preventing card-not-present online payment fraud. And again, basically looking at, we'll see that identity vetting and proofing vendors building organic web fraud, risk-based authentication solutions so that identity vetting and proofing and web fraud management are coming together and converging the way we look at it. Some trends and influencers around web fraud management. On the left-hand side, you have network-level behavioral analytics. This is understanding clickstream analytics, navigational patterns, even before you get to an authentication event. On the right-hand side, you have transactional fraud management and detection. And obviously, the customer experience, B2E and B2B needs, in addition to consumer needs, also play into this. We've seen more and more organizations implementing employee or business partner facing web fraud management solutions. Obviously, cost reduction is definitely out there. You can't hire an infinite number of agents and analysts to look at fraudulent transactions. Identity vetting and proofing plays an important role, as we've seen in this picture. Mobility, being able to conduct all these transactions from mobile devices, creating SDKs to capture more of the context is also very important. And finally, biometrics being the new channel and new area for authentication is really very important. We've seen fingerprint with all the fingerprint readers coming into the forefront of attention on mobile devices, but also voice print as well as facial recognition, especially in Windows 10, becoming an important factor. This is replacing basically the legacy one-time passwords, or augmenting legacy one-time passwords, because biometrics is a true second factor authentication, and it really works well on mobile devices. So some of our predictions here, people are looking at in the entire customer life cycle, not just authentication, applying a layered set of authentication, so web, fraud management, authentication, transaction monitoring, and working with IT security folks as well. Increased use of machine learning and user behavioral analytics, so this is enforcing real-time analytics, real-time interception with a much lower need for training data and training models. So machine learning really learns from transactions as it moves on, as it burns in, so to say, and resulting in the lower need for data scientists and as well as lower operational costs. IT security, enterprise fraud management, and anti-money laundering teams working together on web fraud management. So in the past, all this was an IT security kind of problem. In the future, we see these departments, enterprise fraud, AML, as well as marketing and line of business folks as contributing to the conversation. And finally, web fraud management integrates and will continue to integrate even more deeply with cyber threat intelligence, understanding the entire picture of cyber threat in the enterprise, making sure you are not falling victim to cyber attacks. So with that, I'd like to conclude my part of today's presentation and hand it over to Adam.
Thank you, Andras, and welcome everybody. I appreciate all of your time today, and I think you did a fantastic job outlining all of the different challenges that are out there with not only keeping pace with or trying to stay ahead of some of the fraud behaviors in the different channels, but also trying to maintain the customer experience that we all know is so important for the vast majority of cases that actually do not turn out to be fraud. I think it's safe to say that any of us working in the fraud space probably have a long career ahead of ourselves as the challenges continue to change and evolve over time. I want to start off with a quick overview about Neustar because I think it's important to understand who we are and how we have some of the unique assets that we have. And then we'll jump directly into some of our fraud solutions and how we're serving to solve some of the challenges that Andras just laid out that I know a number of you are dealing with every single day. So at our core, Neustar is a leading information services and analytics company and the leader in identity management today. We live amidst and power a majority of the telecommunications infrastructure. We have proprietary relationships with all the major carriers and MSOs and other players out there. And you can see from the slide on the WebEx, we are powering billions and billions of transactions every single day across a variety of different channels. 6 billion daily text messages, enabling 4 billion daily phone calls. And then in terms of working with our clients and helping answer their questions, we're answering over 2 billion daily client queries every single day, just to name a few. We deal in tremendous amounts of data, and it's imperative that not only is our data accurate, our coverage unparalleled, but also our speed of return of query also as fast as absolutely possible. Neustar is a diverse set of services with over 14,000 different customers, many of whom, particularly in the financial services industry, know us for protecting their websites, protecting their business practices, and protecting their policies and enabling regulatory compliance. Today we're going to focus on how we're helping our clients maintain and improve their P&Ls, their overall brand reputation, and their customer experience through innovative fraud solutions. I think we can all agree that traditional fraud solutions are increasingly facing pressure and quite frankly, performance degradation. It's not to say that we throw the baby out with the bathwater, but in all honesty, the velocity of change and advancement is truly making some of the older solutions a little bit more obsolete. Just a couple of rationale of reasons for that to point out. First of all, it seems that every day a new data breach is being exposed, and these are obviously numbering in the millions and millions of customers' information being compromised every single day. And I'm sure you all just saw the latest one today from a major hotel chain. It's not specific to government agencies or financial services verticals. It's now getting into pharmaceuticals and healthcare and travel and hospitality. It seems that anywhere customer data is being stored today are potential targets. And so as that information is becoming more and more available on the Internet, the ability to overcome some of the traditional ID verification solutions by fraudsters is just increasing. Furthermore, with social media, some of the older solutions, the out-of-wallet questions and so forth, are easily overcomable. For instance, you could go out to Facebook right now and find out my mother's maiden name, my pet's name, my high school mascot, and a variety of others. As Andras said earlier, the truly difficult ones, sometimes only the fraudsters can get right. So it's becoming increasingly more difficult to get that side of the equation right. And then, of course, as online identity is becoming more prevalent and just so many different contact points, it's becoming really difficult to identify the good from the bad, but then also even to identify the good across all of the different channels that are out there. All of us as consumers stand to be the victims not only of the identity theft that could potentially happen, but just the negative customer experiences as banks and other institutions are trying to fight fraud throughout everyday processes. And to make matters worse, the velocity of data change is exploding. So just to name a few stats for you, or to share a few stats with you, every single year, over 90 million consumers change their phone carriers. 60 million consumers change their phone numbers. 21 million households, consumer households relocate, even 2.1 million people change their name. Whereas many years ago, publicly available information was the dominant force. 78% of information was available. Now it's down to 30%. And then the latest stat that we've seen is up to now 44% of U.S. households are mobile only, which of course is not public information. So the anonymity of customers is driving a lot of challenge in even verifying information, and then the fraudsters' ability to gather that information via breaches and social engineering is really making this problem a big challenge. Whether you're dealing with fraud or even marketing, servicing, regulatory matters, etc., it's incredibly important, it's critical to understand the identity across channels and silos. So whereas before you might just have, and even today in your CRMs you may have a home address, a home phone number, a work phone number, and that may be it, increasingly the contact points are much more varied and, again, going back to that velocity point, changing very frequently. So it's really important not only to have the most up-to-date information, but also to understand how all of these pieces fit together or don't. When we work with clients, we often see a number of seemingly disparate contact points showing up in their CRM, or information they think isn't going together, whether it's data for customers that are calling into their call centers, they're calling on their cell phone, but that's not on the CRM, or other different pieces of information like emails. It's a jumbled mess at times, and one of the areas that Neustar can absolutely help is to use our authoritative information to be able to tie those contact points together and provide the most up-to-date information and insights as to where information goes together and where it doesn't. And here's how Neustar is able to accomplish it. So we have over 200 authoritative data providers. We update our repository every 15 minutes of every day, including over 2 million inbound updates every single day. On average, we have about 4.5 sources corroborating the information that we have. We have all U.S. households in our repository. We're able to link that to over 14,000 offline and online attributes. And again, it all resolves back to an authoritative identity at the household level. So we're getting information directly from key partners that have direct billing relationships with the consumers that can corroborate that information, and we're updating it every 15 minutes of every single day. The keys in this, there's really 3. You have to make sure you have the best coverage available. You have to make sure you have the most accurate information possible, and that the frequency of update of that information is absolutely as frequent as possible. So these are the key aspects of that. And with that, we've got our first poll question. So Mike, let me pass it over to you.
Great, thanks, Adam. And yes, as promised, the first poll question is up here, and what I'll do here is I'll just read through the question and then read through the answers. And please just make just choose one of these as your answer. And then by the time I'm done with all that, hopefully everyone will have made their choice, and we'll just move along. So first question is, who is involved in fraud risk mitigation data strategies within your organization? Is it fraud prevention? Is it risk? Is it data analytics? Or security? Or is it operations? Or is it all of the above? And again, if you could just choose one of those options for this poll, that would be great. I'll just wait another moment or two to give everyone a little bit of time. Pretty straightforward question there. And let me go ahead now, and yeah, I think that's enough time. I will go ahead and share the results. And yeah, interesting. Far and away, all of the 59.2% of you said all of the above, and that's far and away the most frequent answer. Operations was the next with 13.2%. So thank you so much for participating in that, and let me turn things back over to Adam.
Thanks, Mike. And not surprising results at all. That's certainly been my experience working on the financial services side of the house. And in our conversations with clients, that's the same thing that we're seeing as well. So a lot of different people play a very important role and have vested interest in this. Let's talk a little bit about how companies use Neustar today. particularly in the fraud space. So first and foremost, we work with clients to help them understand new and different insights to be able to better identify fraud. That enables two things. First of all, being able to reduce the losses themselves, but then also the opportunity to identify the good along with the bad to be able to create more opportunities to offset opportunity costs and improve areas where you may be saying no today, or you may be doing soft declines or hitting the pause button, doing manual reviews, and actually increase the opportunity to be able to say yes. Operational efficiency. The speed and the cost side of this are obviously very important. So only investing the dollars and resources where it truly is necessary, and moving good customers through the process in a much more efficient way drives not only better customer experience, but also operational improvements. And then the third piece is the customer experience side, which I listed third, but honestly, this could have been number one on the list. I know pretty much in every conversation I have with clients, I ask the question, what are you trying to do more? Identify more fraud or improve the customer experience? And the answer is always both, and sometimes skewing on the side of customer experience. So for anybody that's ever been through a potentially fraudulent experience, you know it's a terrible experience, and oftentimes the good person was actually treated like the fraudster at times, and that's obviously something that really needs to change. So going back to the poll that we talked about earlier, whose decision-making process is it? Who is it important to? If you look across these, you could pretty much point to almost anybody in the organization would raise their hand and say it's critically important to them. So here are a few examples of client use cases in fraud. Oops, sorry about that. I skipped the slide. I'm going to go quickly through this in the interest of time. There's really three main areas where Neustar is playing with in the fraud space today. The first one is identity linkages, and that's confirming that the information provided either directly by the consumer or potential fraudster, or indirectly. So things like IP addresses would be something that's indirectly supplied. But those either do go together or do not go together according to our authoritative repository. Those are very important insights, and the unique data that Neustar has is layering on top of traditional fraud solutions and driving really, really impressive results that I'll share with you shortly. Secondly, attributes. These are additional insights based on whether it's the phone or other aspects that help you to understand more about that device and more about the overall fraud risk that could be there. Traditional cases are something as simple as a landline or a wireless phone, understanding whether a wireless phone is prepaid or postpaid. Voice over IP phones are increasingly a preferred channel by fraudsters, and even knowing whether phones have been disconnected or recently ported are finding their way into the process as well. Finally, identity scores. These are using some of the core attributes that we have within our repository and across our company to build models in order to predict different behaviors and the like. So things like identity mismatches and using information like phone numbers, emails, and so forth. So those are really the three categories to think about. And we'll go into these in a little bit more detail shortly. So a few different client use cases that we are working on actively with our clients today. One of the biggest and hottest conversations today is the mobile payment space. In particular, one of the areas where we're seeing a tremendous amount of fraud showing up dollar-wise, not necessarily frequency-wise, is in the registration, the provisioning of the mobile payments platforms. So we're seeing a lot of different interesting fraudulent behaviors occurring that we're able to uniquely identify and mitigate, all in real time, and all while maintaining a good customer experience for the vast majority of customers that are not fraudulent today. Secondly, and this isn't a new use case, but these are areas where we're adding increased insight, is in the originations and transaction spaces. So as more and more transactions occur online, are moving to card-not-present transactions and the like, using unique data assets like mobile phone numbers and IP addresses and voice-over IP phones and so forth, add really unique and valuable insight in separating the goods from the bads. So going back to what I was saying earlier, given the coverage and accuracy of data in Neustar's repository, it's oftentimes not just the identifying the specific linkage, but the combination of linkages that can really identify where the outlier behaviors are, where the outlier footprints of fraudsters lie. So oftentimes we're looking not only at verifying name and address and phone numbers, which of course we can do, but looking at how well all 3 or 4 of them have go together, how long we've seen them appearing, and what the different combinations and permutations, how they combine together in order to be able to truly separate out the very small but high risk populations, and then again enabling the good customers to go through the process very smoothly. So I've already spoken a good bit about our repository and sort of frequency and coverage that we have. The way that the linkage side works is we take the repository that I have and all of the different data assets. We have them linked back to the household level, and we are corroborating and breaking those linkages and rebuilding those linkages every 15 minutes as new data is coming into the system every single day. We are on a query and response model, query and response delivery model, so we deliver our insights in usually 200 milliseconds or fewer, and it's an always-on active-active configuration. So in this 24/7 online world, Neustar is very well positioned to be able to answer the call. So here's a quick illustration of a very high level how the sort of insights that you can get, the output that you can get. In this case, this is for phone verification. So we have very complex algorithms. We have very complex algorithms that look at all of the different information that's inputted in a query, and then we can give authoritative answers back as to whether or not the name, and in this case the phone number, are authoritatively linked due to telco sources, whether they're linked due to other sources but not the authoritative telco sources, or all the way down to the other end of the spectrum to where we have them authoritatively linked to a different consumer at potentially a different address or a different IP address or a different email address and the like. So really trying to understand not only in a binary setting what's good and what's bad, but sort of how that relative rank ordering looks. And the same is, we follow the same methodology for email and address and a variety of others. And then on the attribute side, this is again going beyond just the ownership side of things, looking at, for instance, a phone number and being able to return a tremendous amount of insight around things like, is it a prepaid wireless phone, which obviously fits the burner phone profile? Is it a voice over IP phone? We also can see how active a phone number is. That is, how frequently the phone is making outbound dials, or has it recently become activated or inactive. All of these provide very useful insights in combating fraud. And I'll come back in a minute to share more use cases around that. But let me pass it over quickly to Rupert for a little bit more on IP.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, so our IP intelligence data, we like to call it intelligence because it's more than just IP. We've been producing it, and over that time, we've seen lots of different you can do with IP, as was mentioned earlier. It's easy to get. You always have an IP, no matter what device the customer is coming in, whether they're logged in, registered, and so on. But often people just look at the geographic and just ask, where is this person coming from? Is it similar to the shipping code? But really, there's a lot more that can be looked at. We provide over 30 different fields, and this can tell you things about network context. Are they connecting from mobile or not? Landline. Also important are proxy fields. These are key things. A lot of compliance cases as well as risk cases. People are coming in from anonymizing proxies, and or they may be coming from a server farm, and that obviously should raise red flags. And then finally, we have a set of information about user type. Is it coming from a home consumer or a non-home consumer? So what are some of the best practices that we've seen? A lot of platforms have IP information built in. And so some of the basic things that are often done, check the physical location, But you can go much beyond, farther than that. Have they, logged in from different ISPs in a single day? Are they coming in from an EDU, so a college of some kind, much less safe than a user coming in from a government or a business location? And if they're coming in from public Wi-Fi location, less safe than a school even. And then finally, things around their connection. Is it fixed or mobile? The other area that people often have done some work, but again could be doing a lot more. There was a recent story about a major cloud provider who was hacked into, and turned out they had 2,500 password resets from a home IP. They had not, put that check in to see that someone was coming from a home IP or not. And again, a sophisticated hacker may, recognize that's, being checked, but still should at least check those sort of simple things. Too many clicks. Are they using the same ISP, time zones? Typical velocity checks of the person coming in from a distance that's not possible. The other thing that we've added recently are IP reputation checks. So we have several different types of scores. One is a real user. So is it likely coming from a user, a real end user, or some sort of automated system? That doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but it's still important to know that. Secondly, risk, which really is about IPs that we're seeing bad activity from. The next is usage. So again, we also tell you across 9 different segments of our customers what the relative usage level is, which can be really interesting from a fraud modeling perspective. And again, we obviously, you need to take feedback on these from our customers, and we deliver both as a data file or a REST API. So I'm going to hand it back to Mike for the next poll question here.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Rupert. And yes, so same drill with this question. And it does say what are the most pressing concerns for your organization, but actually we just want your top concern. So just choose one answer, please. So what is the most pressing concern for your organization for the upcoming 6 months to the year ahead? Is it emergence of EMV? Is it verification of identities? Or consumer data breaches? Is it internet security breaches? Or is it mobile authentication? And once again, just choose, well, many of those are probably on your radar screen. If you could choose the top concern for your organization, that'd be excellent. Just give everyone a moment or two so we can share results and then move along with the rest of the program. I'm going to go ahead and share the results now. And excellent, thank you. Yep, verification of identities is got a full third of the answers out there, and consumer data breaches 22.7. Yeah, thank you very much for participating in that. Let me turn things back over to Adam. Adam, any surprises there in those results?
No, not really, Mike. Thank you for running the poll. I would expect all of these to show up to some degree. I'm personally very happy to see verification of identity showing up as highly, because that is an area that we play in, though I imagine we may have a somewhat biased sample, given that everybody's both on the webinar and stuck with us this whole way. But that is increasingly the hardest part of the puzzle, hardest piece of the puzzle, to be sure. So with that, let me take us through a couple of case studies quickly. We'll also save a couple of minutes at the end to address any questions that have come up along the way. But what I wanted to share was some real client examples of the power of unique identity verification information that Neustar has. This one's a little bit hard to read, so I'll guide you through it quickly. But basically, this is a distilled version of a recent client analysis we did. This is a major retail bank, the online account opening process. And we were looking at 3 pieces of information: the phone to name matching, the address to name matching, and the email to name matching on the online applications. And what you can see is we just did a binary verified, not verified for email and physical address, and then we did more of a graduated one for the phones. And what you see here, if you look in the lower right-hand box, the overall population had a 3.1% fraud rate on the entire population. But what you see in here as you look at the high-risk areas for phone, so that vertical that has the red areas in there, and look at some of the other components where email and other components aren't verified, you see massive separation. And the percentages you see in the boxes there are the fraud rates themselves. So on a population of where the average is 3.1%, we saw fraud rates as high as 30 to 35, even 37% in certain categories, certain combinations of the identification. This is just what was submitted on the application. It's important to point out, too, that these were all approvals. So it went through all of the credit checks, it went through all of the ID verification and all of the fraud checking. We were given the population that was approved and subsequently had a 3.1% fraud rate. So this is speaking to incremental insights above and beyond existing solutions that are in place today. So really powerful results. We were able to identify 60% of the fraud losses that were occurring today and only 8.5% of the applications. So again, really trying to drill down into that precision required to be able to maintain a good customer experience. The other thing I'll point out, if you look at the upper left-hand area, sort of those darker green boxes there, you see fraud rates far lower than average, right? 70 basis points or 1%. Again, these are a third to a quarter of the fraud rates of the overall population. It's also where the majority of the applications resided. So these represent good false positive reduction opportunities. So again, the idea is using unique data insights that probably are not baked into current models today, add significant lift to both identify fraud as well as to reduce false positives. The next example I'll give you builds on what we just showed you, but also incorporates IP reputation score that Rupert was talking about earlier. So the summary of everything, we went through and performed a similar analysis on recent approvals, and we were able to identify that in 15% of the file, we could find 80% of the fraud dollars and cases, and annual fraud losses of about $800,000 for this particular client. So this is the power of just the verification component alone. And then when we add IP intelligence on top of that, by only adding an additional 1% to the population in question, we were able to raise the fraud instances by 5 percentage points up to 85%, and the fraud dollars up to 91% of the fraud losses, increasing the fraud savings to over $1 million per year for this particular client. So again, bringing together the power of ID verification using unique insights like email and usually mobile phone, pairing that with the very proprietary information that Neustar has from an IP perspective, provides that much more lift and that much more value for our clients. In the interest of time, I'm going to pause here and hand it back over to the moderator so that we can see if there's any Q&A that we'd like to go through at this point.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. And yeah, we do have some questions, and we're right at the top of the hour. But let's at least get one in here. This is what happens when you've got so much great content and 3 great speakers. You run out of time. All right. So, question: while device fingerprinting is becoming standard in the online channel, please comment on phone printing in the voice channel. Do we have anyone that wants to handle that one, or should I move to the next question? We've got a couple here.
You should, if you can move to the third question.
Absolutely. Okay, dokie. How is Neustar data able to provide lift over traditional risk data sources?
So I can answer that from an ID verification perspective, and then Rupert, you can certainly add on from some of the other components. I think as we just saw from some of the case studies I shared, a lot of the traditional fraud solutions use other identifiers. They'll use social security number, they'll use physical address, date of birth, knowledge-based authentication questions, and the like, all to do still a very good job in identifying fraud. Where Neustar really plays and focuses is in completely different authoritative data elements that are also quite persistent. For example, mobile phone numbers. People are much more likely to trade off their landline phones or other identifiers, even move houses before they'll give up their phone numbers. At least that's what we're seeing these days. So By having that authoritative proprietary information, those layer on top very well, so that when the fraudsters have figured out the other components, we're able to catch them on those communication channels like email address and mobile phone differentially.
Yeah, and just to add on the IP side, many platforms include some basic IP checks and even some more advanced ones. But again, with any type of data, it's always important if you have the capabilities to really look at your own data and see what the specific features are and that really predict the most fraud for your particular use case. So by working with the IP data, which is relatively inexpensive, even if you're getting some of the basic location checks out of your platform today, you can derive a lot more power, as Adam showed in that slide before.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you both. And we are a couple minutes past the top of the hour, and we try to bring these in as close on schedule as possible, respecting everyone's kind of busy schedules. So let me, first of all, thank the speakers. This is what happens, as I said, when you've got great content and 3 great speakers. You run out of time, can't get to all the questions. But audience members, please, if you did put in a question that we didn't get to, as I said, we will follow up afterward and answer your questions. So thank you for putting those in, and it's not in vain. Your questions will be answered. And also, please, everyone in the audience, attendees today, we'll be sending you an email in the next 24 to 48 hours with a link to the recording of this program, and you can re-listen to all of it or portions of it at your leisure in the future, and we kind of encourage you to do that. And with that, let me wrap things up. Wish everyone a wonderful rest of the day, and I hope you'll join us again here very soon. Thanks so much.